I'm Lee Henson-Hasty. I'm the Senior Director of Theological Education Funds Development for the Committee on Theological Education at the Presbyterian Foundation. And it's been so much fun over the last few months hosting and introducing people sometimes to leaders who lead theologically. And that's actually my podcast now, Leading Theologically. Today I have with me Bertram Johnson. He is a wonderful leader in the PCUSA. If you don't know him, based in the New York City area, New York City Presbyterian, member in good standing. He's approaching his 7th anniversary of his ordination, just later this month. And so excited to have you with us, Bertram, and glad electricity's back on where you live.
I am glad that it's on too. We would have had to do this by my phone, which would have worked, but
right. This is the way it works in the pandemic. I mean, we just cross our fingers and hope, that the technology holds up. That's for sure. I'm just glad to have you here. Bertram is the Interfaith chaplain at Union Theological Seminary in New York City. And that is a role, a pastoral care kind of role at the seminary. He also supervises a number of peer chaplains. They're seminarians at Union. They meet regularly. That gives him a great context and also maybe an education for some of you all who don't know what's happening in theological education today, to hear about kind of what's happening live on the ground. I think y'all meet weekly to talk about topics, but he has a beautiful background in this. We're going to post his bio in the links there, but you can Google at Union Theological Seminary. He is also served first right out of seminary. He went to Princeton Theological Seminary and graduated in 1996. Oh my gosh. And then served at University Church in Seattle. And a number of other places. He ended up at Riverside Church in New York City most recently, and then back to Union. Middle Collegiate was part of that. He's involved in HIV chaplaincy, oncology chaplaincy. This guy is involved in Next Church National Strategy Team. He also will be a preacher. We might want to hear about that. Actually, the opening worship preacher for the Next Church National Gathering that's going to be in early March. I wrote down that date somewhere around here. I think it's March 5th or 7th or something like that. Opening worship at 11 a.m. that day. We'll get that. Please join. That's a free event for anybody. You've got to register, but please register and join us then. But as I do for each show, Bertram, I wanted to ask about what it is that is making you come alive. You're a newlywed, just over like a year and a half, right? And I'm hoping that's giving you life. But what is it that's making you come alive? What is the work your soul must have, as Katie Cannon, a Union grad, by the way, used to say?
Reverend Dr. Katie Cannon, yes, we're grateful for her legacy there, and throughout the whole denomination. But
right,
I started work at Union Theological Seminary back in January. So yeah, I've been there for a year now.
Wow.
And came on as one of two interfaith ministers, and I'll also say that the other person who's the other interfaith minister is also a Presbyterian.
Oh,
Fran Thiessen, which is beautiful to have both of us in those sharing that role there.
Right.
But I would say the thing that's really sort of filling me is really the work with students, to be able to sit with them in their discernment process. And you talk about chaplaincy. I mean, the title is interfaith minister, but I really do serve as a chaplain, offering spiritual care and guidance for seminarians as they discern their way into future call into ministry and life and service to God and the church and the world as a whole. And yeah, one of the reasons I was hired is that I've been commissioned with starting a program to help students support students. So I recruited 3 students back in the spring, and then they started working as peer chaplains. And so we meet every week to talk to offer them support and guidance, supervision as they discover their role in developing a new program in the midst of a pandemic. Because when we had the vision, when Union had the vision for the project, no one knew that the pandemic was coming. And so we had to adjust and figure out what does it mean to provide spiritual care online. So I've been doing all of my chaplaincy work at Union since the second week of March online, and been pretty consistent with that throughout the entire year.
Wow. And that gives you life, that connection with those peer chaplains. That's part of what's giving you life.
Yeah. Working with seminarians is a bit intimidating. They come with, their strong ideals, and Union has a strong sense of justice. And so use of language and how we talk about God and spirit. And, my title is Interfaith. And so not all the students I serve, or we serve at the seminary, are of one tradition. And so being able to sit with a person who has a different perspective on God and theology and faith and the language and the traditions that they come from, it can be sort of intimidating to a degree. But I'm grateful to be able to, that I have skills and resources. And having worked, you talk about my HEV work, I worked in Seattle for a number of years, or about 7 years, doing HEV chaplaincy for an organization called Multi-Faith Works. And I think that gave me the background of being able to listen to people of other traditions and help them connect to God in a way that's meaningful in the language and the sense of heart that's true for them.
Mm-hmm. The word that seems key to me, and part of a real important part of this conversation in many ways, is a verb you just used, is listen. And in providing spiritual care and pastoral care and friendship and relationship and being tuned into the spirit, however you want to talk about it, I feel like that must be where it starts. I don't know if you have more to say about that. What are you listening to or listening for?
I think listening for the truth that's behind just the words, listening and sensing how the spirit is moving, might be moving in a person's experience or my experience in the moment. One of the things, I don't know if I shared this with you, is that I'm also in the process of being trained as a spiritual director right now.
Oh, no. Okay.
Through an Episcopal church in Brooklyn. And part of the interesting thing about that group, we're being trained and supervising at the same time, but it's a group of, it's a predominantly African-American congregation. And we're all people of color who are involved in the leadership, who are in this training program. And so I'm getting this listening work. Sitting and listening has become a more regular part of my spiritual practice. I'm started this year doing more centering prayer. Over a year, I've been trying to, not every day, but most days of the week, try to sit and listen for the way that God's Spirit is moving me, which definitely informs the work that I'm doing with the students and the places where I'm offering pastoral care, spiritual care, and other places in my life.
We had started just talking informally. I was punching in the title of our conversation, and I sort of joked, I started with providing spiritual care to self and others, but I think we have it titled Others to Self. But you mentioned it does kind of start with that, with yourself. If you're not having taken care of your own spirit and your own connection to God first, it's hard to, I know that most folks know that, but it's an important reminder. And this seems like the centering prayer you're doing is one way that you're taking care of yourself and your own spirit.
Well, yeah, it's a way for me to be connected to God and to, I think, calm myself, first of all, in this time of pandemic where there's lots of chaos and anxiety and fear. There's violence, there's threat, from political leaders and from folks in the community. And so spending time in a way that grounds me, that at least combats some of the fear that I may experience as a Black man, as a Black gay man walking through this world in this time. So that time with God is central. And I realize in days when I don't do it in the morning, I know that I need to do it at night just to put some closure to get me centered again before, I start another day coming.
Right.
But also the work with the seminarians, like, there's transference, there's, I don't want to put myself into their place and
Correct.
stuff aside. So me being centered on what God is saying to me and listening on their behalf to what God might be saying to them is also sort of a role that I share in that work.
Well, I mean, it seems like that role, and maybe it's why Presbyterians are in it. I mean, this is what we do with sessions, right? I mean, this is how sessions, if they are spiritual leaders in their churches, are hopefully functioning this way in one way or another, or maybe the board of deacons too, or maybe it's all together. But it seems like that's a similar role. Listen, as a pastor or as a moderator, of a session, you're helping listen for them too, and paying attention. That really makes sense. What does that look like? Does that look like silence? Does it look like meditation? Does it look like reading? Is it different for you every day, or what are those practices that are
practice?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
right.
Most of the day, I have a friend who's doing extended study with Richard Rohr Institute.
Mm-hmm.
And he has been a guide for me in this work. And so I've read some work about centering prayer, and I forget the articles that we started with. But I take about 20 minutes in the morning, and I focus on a given. Often it's a phrase, a notion of spiritual truth that I want to hold on for myself, or often it's an inviting of the Spirit to come, to be present. So come, Lord Jesus. Maybe a phrase that I use. And I think in that space of vulnerability, making myself open to how God might be moving, speaking, what God might be saying in that place. And I really try to allow that time, my centering prayer time, to be really just that, that I'm not calling to mind other things that I need to pray for. So sometimes I'll start with the centering prayer, and then after that, go into my own time of thanks and petition, intercession. But really the centering prayer is to allow myself to open my heart to how God may be moving in that moment. Mm-hmm.
I like the posture you even started moving back, just kind of, there is a posture almost of openness. It's not, I always was taught to pray just so closed, and it's been a real gift to me to start to just feel more open. And
essential, like penitent and humble posture, but also allowing myself to be open and used and motivated and moved, inspired by the Spirit.
Mm-hmm. Amen. That's beautiful. So tell us some about the conversations that are happening. I don't want to, no confidentialities or what have you given away, but what are the kind of directions, the hopes, the dreams, the practices within this peer chaplaincy program? Because that seems like that's a way you're caring for them and they're caring for others too. I guess there's some modeling, I'm guessing, that's happening there. Is that the idea?
Yeah. I'm providing spiritual care for them in the way that they hopefully will model and practice that with their classmates. Mm-hmm. We went through some, I'd say, fairly thorough training in helping them understand their role and like what they are there to do and also what they're not to do. Mm-hmm. Setting clear boundaries that, no one can be anyone's, we're not there as therapists, we're not there as saviors. We're really there to help them listen to God's voice. And so it really takes the pressure off of us. We're not there to fix or to get them to move in a particular direction as to only what they hear God saying for them. Mm-hmm. So we speak, I meet with the 3 students that I'm supervising on a weekly basis. And we just process the situations that come up. We talk about their anxieties, the fears that they've had over the semester. And it's been beautiful to see them evolve and grow into that, or grow through the insecurity into a sense of like, I'm just holding space, and how God shows up for this person is, I'm able to sit with them in that and encourage them to follow their own path as opposed to one that we try to set for them, because the path that we set may not be the path that God
you're wants. Not prescribing this is what you need to do.
Right. The goal is really to encourage them to find deeper connection to God.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's interior work. That's ongoing work. That's beyond the 45 minutes or hour that you spend with some person.
Right.
And you may only see them once. You may just come that one time. But there's a lot of as I don't know if you went through this experience, vocational discernment questions.
Sure.
Challenges. People are doing field education placements for the first time, working in a new city in a new church. And trying to figure out what does it mean to be a pastor, to speak with integrity and authority, and how to bring creativity into worship and leadership in this time when everything's happening online. And so I'm supervising students, but I'm also seeing students outside of the three that I'm supervising. And people are just trying to figure out also, like, the world that I came to serve in seminary, it doesn't look like the world that we're in right now. And I'm questioning of call and direction after seminary. And then people go through, real life issues of, I had 3 students who lost family members between March and May of this year or last year. And how does that impact their call to ministry or relationship with family? And then not being able to grieve, not being able to go home and grieve those loved ones in the way that they would have had it not been this pandemic time. And so these are all real questions, real life issues where people are seeking God. We're seeking a sense of truth and comfort and support. Actually, I just have another student. I'm thinking I had a 4th student who's had she lost her father over the holidays and just wrote me yesterday to schedule another time to talk about how she's processing that with her family. And so I'm not in the congregation, but these are things that, congregational pastors encounter on a day-to-day basis. And I'm just doing it in a different context where I don't know all the folks, but they come to me or Reverend Fran and are looking for another place to get some guidance and support in the midst of their journey.
It seems like something that's important there that we shouldn't miss kind of between the lines is they are coming to you. Not always do people come to us who are there in need. I'm always, the classic thing is like, why didn't you come see me? I was in the hospital. I didn't know, that kind of thing is, and I think particularly now in this pandemic. And so I'm wondering what you're learning during this time that's maybe different or important, or just, that you're learning, or you're along taking care of yourself and others, that helps create that kind of, there's some trust there, I think, that is being nurtured. We're not running into each other in the hallways, right? Or in the worship space. So you've got, or maybe it's this weekly meeting, that's not about an agenda in terms of a business agenda. I mean, your agenda is a spiritual agenda. Yeah. It sounds like. I just wonder what it is that can, that could be takeaways for congregational leaders for on this topic.
Well, I think in the midst of all the programming that churches are trying to maintain and develop, even new programming in the midst of this time, spiritual care is core to the work and life of Christian community and to the church. And I think if we could be maybe more invested in the ways that we provide care for people, not so much new programming, but checking in with families in the ways that you can. Reaching out to the folks who, in a congregational context, maybe you haven't heard from them or seen them in the Zoom worship lately, reaching out to that family and seeing how they're doing, just letting them know that you care for them. I have a friend who I was talking to, she works in ministry in Florida, and there's a family that just had a new baby. And instead of sending them something through the, online or email, she wrote, hand wrote.
I've been doing a lot of that myself. I think it's for me too. It's not just for the other person.
What do you feel like you get from that?
I think it's the knowledge that somebody is going to touch something that I touched. I think it's something around the touch, because here I can't touch you, and I think that's part of it. I think it also is the slower, that it's slower. It's not just the instantaneous. I feel like kind of I can continue to pray about that or think about that as it goes. And it's always really fun because, folks will text me back, I got your card, and I don't know, there's something neat about that. But it makes me smile to have those connections. I don't know.
I think that the tangible, the having the card, the note, whatever it is, in a culture where we don't do that often, it feels sort of abnormal now to actually,
right.
Christmas cards and birthday cards are so important.
Yeah.
But it's an additional step that you took to actually communicate grace and care to a person.
Right.
That really means a lot. It's humanizing.
Right. Now I'm thinking about what informs some of your practices, particularly working in the HIV/AIDS community and in the cancer community. That had to be something that informs how you think about it during these COVID times. I don't know if there's something you have to share there.
Well, this is an aside, but I'm also now working for the COVID Prevention Network.
Okay.
Helping raise awareness about COVID prevention, research and advances among faith communities. So started that as a consultant back in the fall. For folks working across the U.S., across denominations and interfaith. I have a colleague who's a Muslim woman with a gifted ministry in HIV. This is definitely a part of what I'm doing, and it feels like these issues keep coming up in my life. It seems like there's a call and place in that. But I think the thing that I learned from the HIV/AIDS community when I first started working, when I was doing CPE, honestly, as a chaplain at Grady Memorial Hospital.
Oh, wow. In Atlanta. Wow. We're praying for Atlanta.
Thank God for Georgia. But yeah, worked at Grady the summer of '94. So I turned 24 that summer. And that was my real exposure to the HIV/AIDS community. And, being 24 with limited life experience from a small town in Northeast Florida, 1 year seminary, I didn't really know what I had to offer.
Wow.
Folks who were, in Grady, which is the public hospital there, and seeing primarily men, gay men who were dying from the virus. To hear the stories of how they had been, to come in as a chaplain, to be a person who was younger probably than they expected, but to hear the stories of how they'd been rejected by their families, by their communities, by the society as a whole, but more importantly, or just as importantly, by faith communities, by churches, be condemned, to say that, to hear that the virus that they have, the condition that they were living with, was a sign of God's judgment and cursing. And I wasn't an out man at that point in my life, but I understood what it felt like to be rejected. I understood what it felt to be pushed to the margins and considered and other. And it felt like my job as a chaplain at that point was to be an ambassador of God's love and grace, to remind them that they were beloved as they were, and that this is not God's judgment, and that I, in a tangible way, have to hold hands and touch foreheads and offer prayer for people who'd been, mostly men who'd been sort of left for death. Few visitors, lots of shame and condemnation socially, and it helped me see how important your presence, being present with someone, offering God's grace.
It's showing up for them, and I mean, we can still do that, and even if it's virtual, remote, as Frank Yamada reminded me a couple of months ago. We're not virtual. This is real. Yeah, it's just not. You can still be present with someone, but just remotely. I think that's
incarnational. The way God's presence in whatever venue or format you're doing it, how you do it. Do that for the folks that we're called to serve.
I want to make sure there are some folks watching. I'll mention Jessica Tate, who's commenting on our bow ties, and Letitia Wells as well. amening this deeper connection with God. I think that's where it really starts, providing care for self and others, is nurturing that connection. And not everybody does it exactly the same way, but I think your practices of centering prayer, are there other things that you would say that are helping take care of yourself? Meals with your spouse, or walks, I don't know what it might be.
We do set dinner as a priority. He's a morning person. I'm more of a late person. He gets up earlier. We actually did share breakfast together, but we usually have our breakfast, lunch separate. He's on calls, I'm on calls. We're doing different things throughout the day, but dinner is really the time where we regardless of what we've done, to find our grounding as a couple. I will say this, we are currently out of the U.S. We've been out of the U.S. since October 27th. We've been
providing. That's taking care of yourself. New York City has kind of been ground zero for this virus.
So we actually left New York in early April 1st and stayed with a friend upstate pretty much until the fall because he lives on a farmhouse on 25 acres and said, you guys should leave the city.
Right.
In our 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, wouldn't have given us this.
Right. That was going to get scary real fast and stir crazy, right?
Yeah. One of us on the Zoom call out front, one of us on the Zoom call. And so, finding ways to care for your spirit, to create space for rest is incredible. And I would actually challenge a lot of church leaders right now. Do you need to do all that you're doing? I know there's a sense to maintain the church, but programming and all the activities to keep church lively, and I understand there's a balance, but what can you do to care for yourself and actually not try to replicate and keep up with sort of capitalism in the way that we experience it? We're afraid the church is going to fall because we're not getting money, but I think the ministry of care for the congregation may be just as important or more important than keeping the money flowing in. And that one might be together.
I want to say to you, and I've experienced this in a number of, and it's been true today, and it seems important to this conversation is, and unfortunately we're running out of time, I can't believe it, but you asked beautiful, life-giving, opening questions. And that's a great question for a pastor, for any of us. To ask is, do you need to keep doing all you're doing to really still answer your call? I think this is so important. I was just reading, and I recommend this. I will be recommending this a lot. An article by Dean Thompson in the latest Presbyterian Outlook on mentoring, and he has a series of really great questions along these lines. He came and spoke at Sing Sing Prison. As part of the New York Theological, your sister school there, at their program in Sing Sing. It's just amazing. And I think asking those questions, you do a beautiful job of that. I'm going to be following that. And folks, it is March 5th, Friday, March 5th. Mark your calendars, 11 a.m. Bertram will be preaching for Next Church National Gathering. Please be sure. I think there's links there. Register. Invite all your friends, invite your session, if you're on the session, invite your pastor, everybody to come and join. I think it's going to be a great event. And that, by the way, they're not trying to do everything just the way it's done. I think that they're scaling it back, but there's some really key things happening there. I'll be back on. It would normally be January 20th, but that's inauguration day for our next president of the United States. So we're going to go to Thursday, the 21st. And I have a pastor from Southern California. Some of you may or may not know Jessica Von Lower. She's in a PhD program in leadership. And we'll be talking about leading congregations in 2021. I hope you'll join us for that. That should be a lot of fun. She's super energetic. You're an Enneagram 4, which also Rumi and Cher are both Enneagram 4s. That seems like that fits. I don't know why.
I'm between Rumi and Cher.
I'm very excited, and I know you love show tunes. So I'm very excited to invite you, because who knows what you will do, to offer a charge and benediction, what that's going to sound like. If that would be a blessing to me for sure.
Now I feel like I need to pull Rumi and Cher and the theater piece into that. But I will just say, go in peace, and take time for yourself today. To sit in the presence of God and allow God just to nurture you and care for you as you are. You are God's beloved, and God is with you. God is with us all. Go in peace.
Go in peace. Thank you so much, Bertram. Also, Bertram is a writer. He was part of the writing team for the Sarasota Statement. So when you go to the next church, look that up too. Such a gift to the church and the world, Bertram, you are. And thanks for taking time to be with us today. It means so much. I was touched, especially by your benediction. An
invitation. It's an honor to share in our larger denomination. So.
Amen. Friends, we'll see you soon, we hope. Take care.
Peace.